out of sometimes what people will say is a curse, they really turn it into a blessing. The strategy of investing in yourself and through yourself so that you can really help those others around you is the same. All they said was get into Harvard and Yale, right? And it's like, how? They don't know. Whenever people find out that I'm a psychiatrist, they're like, tell me what's wrong with me. Like, what's going on?
Yeah. And that's part of my recovery journey, is that my feelings and my emotions are on God. God is God.
No matter where you are, what diagnosis you have, is an image of God. No matter what happens, like, I know that God has me, and I think that gives me confidence to take more risks. Hey guys, this is Dr. Kim from Good News Mental Health Podcast. And I wasn't planning on recording this, but it's just kind of, like my pastor says, downloaded in my heart. And I just wanted to kind of share with you because I think some of us, including myself, needs to hear this, that you don't need to be perfect and you don't need to, beat your competitor to get a pat on the back from God. And I think a lot of times we think that. So the background story is that I was talking to a family member, and he kind of grew up in a family culture where asking for help or asking questions was not a thing. And everybody just kind of, took care of themselves and decided for themselves and worked through it themselves. And I've seen this pattern of not asking for help that really stunted his growth and stunted his possibilities and potential. And I was just using this parable of multiplying talents. I think some of you guys will know this pretty well, but I really dug deep into the last servant who buried his talent in the ground out of fear and also out of assumptions. As a Christian psychiatrist kind of looking at this parable, I wanted to break it down for you how I see it, and how we can all get out of this trap of comparison. We are in Matthew 25:14. For this will be like a man going to a journey who called his servants and entrusted them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received that 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered me, deliver me to me 5 talents. Here I made 5 talents more. The master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I'll set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he also who had the 2 talents came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here I have made 2 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I'll set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He also who had received that 1 talent came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you do not sow, and gathering where you scatter no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, you have what is yours. But the master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I scatter no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has 10 talents. So to everyone who has will more be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast a worthless servant into the outer darkness, in that place where it be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So I'm sure you guys are familiar with this parable. I was. And every time I read it, I get something new. But I wanted to kind of break it apart because there are a few key words here about the last servant that I think we find ourselves doing a lot. I think first thing is really cool is that God gives us talents according to our abilities, meaning he knows what you're capable of and how you will use it. But interesting thing is that he gave us the talents according to our abilities, but both first 2 servants just doubled it. So in a way, the 10 talents and 4 talents, comparing numbers, numerically 10, 4, 1, there's a big difference, but actually the strategy is to double what you have, right? The strategy is the same, but he gave you what you could handle. So that's a interesting observation. Another interesting observation is that the servant with the 2 talent didn't compare himself with the one who had 5, which is more than double, and said, well, there he has 5 and I have 2. He didn't get discouraged. He applied the same strategy and same actions to double what he had, which made his 2 talents into 4. So these are certain strategies. And sometimes I think, talents are not just attributes, positive attributes like high IQ or money or time or creativity. It actually sometimes could be your pain points, history of trauma, the upbringing that you didn't get. And I don't say that as, half-heartedly. I listen to hundreds and thousands of my patient stories. But what is amazing is that despite what the past had brought or what events happened to my patients, some of them multiply those talents and extract wisdom and truth and grace out of those events. Out of sometimes what people will say is a curse, they really turn it into a blessing. So I don't think it's like, ho-hum, like I had so many horrible things happen to me that kind of makes you stop investing in yourself. Actually, the strategy in investing in those talents in yourself and through yourself, I think the strategy is the same. So I hope that this encourages you to not, when you look at your talents and when you look at the childhood events that you had or bullying or your high IQ, your giftings, you don't look at them and say, oh, well, it's not that much. The strategy of investing in yourself and through yourself so that you can really help those others around you is the same. Now let's kind of focus on the third servant. What did the third servant do that really made him feel and be stuck? I think first thing is what the second servant didn't do is that he compared the number of his talents. So maybe number of positive attributes. Maybe some of you guys went through a really hard time. Maybe this is a hard time right now. Maybe odds are stacked against you and you just don't know. It is really hard to say, I think there's a limitation of positive psychology and false hope and, fake it until you make it. But I want you to not look at those as in the eyes of fear, but in the eyes of an investor. So this is gifted to me. This is what I have. What can I do with them? So I think just looking at his talents and how much he didn't have compared to the other person, I think that really discouraged him. And out of that discouragement, there's an interesting thing that he said, which I think is pretty bold for a servant to say that to the master who just came back. He said, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid. So he's actually saying your character is ridiculous and you're extra harsh, unreasonably harsh, and you expect people to make things out of nothing. So I just buried it. Now, isn't it interesting that his character read of his master is completely different from the first two? And I don't know, exactly what the third servant's intention and effort to read it that way, but I know it to be true. Maybe these are assumptions. Maybe it was his personal first impression of the master. But how dangerous is it to be stuck in your assumptions about people? What if he just asked the first two servants, hey, like, isn't the boss like really like harsh? And the first two would be like, I never had that. What happened? Those kind of communication and checking your assumptions is so powerful because sometimes we just live in our heads and we react out of our fear and our disappointments. And we carry this narrative in our heads about our lives, about other people's lives. But when we don't connect with other people and check our assumptions, that's where the danger lies, because out of that assumption, we act out of the assumptions. And not only do we isolate ourselves and we don't maximize our potentials, but we really miss out on the greater gifts and greater opportunities. So I think the first thing that I kind of noticed the third servant did was he lived based out of his assumptions and he didn't check it with people next to him. And then he says, so I was afraid and I went and hid your talent to the ground. Here, you have what is yours. So again, going back to out of the assumption and out of disappointment, how he valued himself. He only valued himself for the one talent that the master knew his abilities and trust him with. So maybe out of bitterness, maybe out of disappointment, maybe out of his fear and assumptions about the master, He just hid and gave it away. But going back to the previous points, first two servants, they had different number of talents as well. First one had 5 and the second one had 2. The second one didn't compare himself with what was given. He just thought, okay, this is what I have. What do we do? Same strategy. They both multiplied it by 2. Not 3, not 1, both 2. Now, this is a second thing that the third servant did is even if he looked past on, okay, this is not a harsh master or something like that, and he wants to multiply, he buried it in the ground. And when master came back, there was a way to put in a bank and get interest. But you know what? A crucial thing that I think third servant could have done very easily is ask. What is your strategy? And sometimes we get stuck in thinking that I have to figure this out by myself. Somehow I have to multiply 1 to 10 because the first guy is getting a 10, end up getting 10 talents. So I have to somehow make this 1 expand to 10. How do I do this? And I don't know. And out of overwhelm, we just bury our talents in the ground. And let me just encourage you. Life, especially when it comes to expanding, your influence and impact in a positive way, it's the same strategy. We go to the marketplace. We do this. We diversify our stocks, right? I'm just using the financial terms, but it's a similar strategy. And there's so many people around you who's already doing that. And let me just encourage you. You don't have to figure out everything on your own. And that was really hard for me because growing up, I kind of had to figure out a lot of things on my own. Not only because I was the oldest, but I was an immigrant. So there's a lot of things that my parents didn't know, like how to apply for college. All they said was get into Harvard and Yale, right? And it's like, how? They don't know. So, like, what is a scholarship? What is a financial aid? I had to figure that out on my own with those crazy slow internet season 1990s. If you guys grew up with me in the 1990s, to let's empathize together how slow the internet was. So I kind of had this assumption that, oh my gosh, I need to somehow maximize my talents tenfold because I had this assumption that like I had to be the best in the room to get a pat on the back, from my master, right? So somehow I had to do that. I can't share my notes. I can't ask for notes. I have to figure this out on my own. But that is not true. I'm almost 38 and I'm just learning that there are people who would love to share their mistakes and their wisdom gained through their experience. And I'm all about that. And I think something that I really appreciated about my parents is that when it was a good time to have a discussion, they were wonderful teachers. And I think on their good days, they did encourage a lot of questions. And I love asking questions. I love asking for wisdom. And that's just something that I want to encourage you guys that there's so many people around. Just look around. Who's making impact? Who's making influence? Who's keeping their home peaceful and safe? Who has their marriage kind of together? It's not perfect, but they kind of figured out, the hows and the whys. Go and ask. What's your strategy? I have this talent. How can I make it grow like you did with yours? And I think the third assumption that the third servant really got stuck in is he forgot that he worked in the same company as the other two servants. If you're a master and you have this X amount of money, sure, you want to kind of find your employees that are excellent and who really takes ownership over your investments, right? But at the end of the day, wouldn't it be wonderful if all the employees kind of share notes together and really multiply your investment and your property like X-fold? But I think the third servant was so stuck in who am I? What do I have? What does he have? That relative comparison that he forgot that they're actually same employee for the same company. And I think this is where I think churches and Christianity and maybe just people in general, we forget that we are the same. It's like, oh, she has this opinion or she has this strategy or this. And if she gets a praise and I don't get a praise, it feels like there's like a finite amount of praise going around or right and wrong going around. Or if I'm saying this and this is saying this, then we're enemies. But at the end of the day, especially in church, we work for the same God. We work for the same company. And at the end of the day, we're just here to share notes so that our company can grow bigger. So I hope that this makes you think, maybe I'm not competing with fellow servants, multiplying talents. Maybe we're just working towards the same goal of we just want to expand this company and make it do well. Maybe it was not about just me getting a praise. Maybe we can all get a praise and a raise because the second servant followed where the first servant was going to multiply his talent from 2 to 4. Same strategy. He looked, he asked, he did the same thing. He didn't have that boohoo moment, comparing 2 to 4 and he just stopped. Well, he's doing the market, so I guess I have to try this. Guys, at the end of the day, there's enough grace and there's enough talents to go around. I think all God asks of us is really, do you take ownership over the talents that I have? Do you live by the assumptions that you keep on writing in your head, or are you willing to break those assumptions and ask questions? And are you willing to understand that you're part of the team that has the same goal, same mission, and so many variety of strategies? So let's not get hung up on the differences. Let's not get hung up on how much talent I have and he has. Let's just be faithful with what was given and talk to each other, challenge each other's assumptions, and share strategies. Because at the end of the day, we're in the same company, so we can all celebrate together. And this was an interesting moment for me too. And I think there was like a viral reel, viral for me, over 1,000 shorts reel, when I was really sharing the moment where I was, picking up speaking gigs and I wasn't getting a lot of tractions. I wasn't getting validation. And there was a Korean American speaker at a women's conference at my church. And, let's say we had same amount of talent and she was multiplying her talents and I wasn't multiplying mine in a concrete way. And I was telling my friend, I was like, oh, she's Korean American, pastor's wife getting a speaker's gig. I'm a Korean American child psychiatrist. I'm not on stage. And I was boo-hooing myself. I was burying my talents in the ground and I was about to give up. I think really God challenged me. I was like, can you celebrate that she's multiplying hers? And did you know that her success doesn't take away from your success? Can you just celebrate and be in the same team with her? I totally forgot that I was an employee of the company. I thought I was a solopreneur running my own business in God's name. So guys, I hope that this message was encouraging to you, knowing that you're not alone. You don't have to figure it out alone. And that talents are not just always quote unquote positive and productive traits. It actually could be your painful history moments, but that doesn't mean that you can't multiply. Sometimes I think painful talents can multiply even more. So instead of comparing ourselves and seeing the outward, number of the talents, I wish that we just knew that God doesn't expect us to beat the other person, beat the next Christian to create impact. He just wants you to be faithful with yours. And last and most importantly, challenge your assumptions, share stories, share strategies, because we're all in this together. So I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you in the next episode.